So let's look at some of the early dynastic period and Old Kingdom tools. The following chisels must have had different functions, such as wood and stoneworking tools. There are two main types of tools used for dressing stone. The flat mortise chisel, which was used for cutting into a surface, while the round bar chisel was used for flattening a surface. And you notice the shape, like they're chunky chisels compared to what you would see used by a mason, because copper is not as good as steel. But Kasep Kemwe, okay, we also have these others. Copper alloy, flat mortise chisel. That's an important feature because here we also see some other Old Kingdom finds and possibly pre that period. Copper was the most common metal for everyday use in ancient Egypt. Copper in Egypt often contained natural arsenic, therefore it was particularly hard. Copper ores were mined and melted in the eastern desert and in the Sinai. You'll find these copper alloys again in South America, Mesopotamia and elsewhere. Later tin bronze come in, but these copper alloys, bronzes, are an important feature now. So the ancient Egyptians and other ancient peoples did not use pure copper in the way that we think of it now, 99.9% pure. Their copper was an alloy or a mixture with other elements, and whether it was natural or artificial, we'll come to that, but copper alloys. So by definition, you would call them a bronze. Not a tin bronze, but steel is just iron with impurities, and bronze is just copper with impurities in the sort of stricter sense. But copper in Egypt often contained natural arsenic, therefore it was particularly hard. Again, the ancients did not use pure copper, not the way we think of pure copper now. It was natural arsenic, particularly hard. And let's look at Kasep Kemwe. Here's a paper, Copper for the Afterlife in Pre-Dynastic to Old Kingdom Period. And I'll, of course, link these papers in the description. Here they link the tomb of Kasep Kemwe and some of the artifacts found in there. Contains naturally, it's particularly hard, again, South America and Peru, for instance. Machu Picchu, they had a bismuth alloy copper knife was found there. But back to, again, arsenical copper and arsenical bronze. Well, they're essentially the same things. We'll get to the definitions in a moment. But arsenical bronze is added to copper to make bronze. The use of arsenic with copper, either as a secondary constituent or with another component such as tin, results in a stronger final product and better casting behavior. It's strong. Now, for instance, the steam engines, the old trains, they would specify arsenical copper for the use in the boilers to add strength. Bell casting and early cannon casting, they would use a tin bronze, but they would add arsenic to improve the casting behavior. Copper ore, now hence the term arsenical bronze when used in archaeology is typically only applied to alloys with arsenic content higher than 1% by weight in order to distinguish it from potentially accidental additions of arsenic. So arsenical copper less than 1%, arsenical bronze more than 1%, and means that it was added intentionally. I'm quoting the Wikipedia article here, but even you can use the references and links in Wikipedia because it's pretty good actually, this particular article, and I'll link some others such as by Martin Odler and some other folk as well who have analysed these artifacts and from other parts of the world. And again, this concept of soft copper. Well, they're thinking of annealed copper and they're thinking of modern copper in that sense as well, not what the actual ancients were using. Arsenical copper less than 1% could be accidental. Above 1% arsenical bronze means they were putting it there intentionally. So arsenical bronze, when used in archaeology, typically only applied to alloys with arsenic content higher than 1%. We go back to Kasep Kemwe. Copper alloys of above 1%, so 1.1, 1.2, up to 3.1% arsenic. Includes traces of antimony, nickel and tin. Antimony bronze is another form of a copper alloy which makes it much harder and used still now for for instance, in places where sparks and igniting materials might be a problem, the workers will use a bronze hammer, which is usually antimony mixed in there as well, or nickel. But Egyptian copper was not just arsenical copper; it was arsenical bronze, as in Tomb of Kastet Kemwe. And again, I'll link Martin Odler and other papers, because even the adzes, those sort of axe-looking type tools, they were using arsenical bronze, which again suggests that these primitive, have you noticed how the lost ancient high technologists always poison the well with phrasing such as primitive Stone Age people when talking about the ancients? Firstly, Stone Age people who make their livelihood depends on making stone tools, would know something about stone. So beside primitive Stone Age people, like they couldn't work stone, and primitive, always primitive. Well, primitive research might be, and poisoning the well, psychological tactics used by this particular group. You ever notice how they tell you what mainstream archaeologists always say? Even though mainstream archaeologists publish on the sophisticated bureaucracy of dynastic Egypt, and also, well, again, the papers I'm showing you here, that their metallurgy was quite advanced. So it's like the lost ancient high technology industry doesn't want you to know what's actually going on. They want you to believe something that's untrue, and they promote this, unsophisticated primitive Stone Age people can, with soft copper, la 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 la. They use the same thing over and over again. Archaeologists and mainstream Egyptologists don't do. They won't tell you this. They don't look into this. Yes, they do. They publish. They publish it publicly, without being asked to do this by the the truth-seeking alternative, as it is. It's a scam, or it's just gross incompetence on their part. But again, given they censor anything that they don't want to hear to cover it up from their audience, who might get suckered into paying to buy their trashy books or go on their grossly overpriced stone pointing tours, well, it's a scam. But arsenical copper, what is it? It's less than 1% arsenic by weight. Arsenical bronze more than 1%, because it means that it's not a natural impurity, it's been added. So lost ancient high technologist translator, when they say impossible, it means possible. When they say primitive Stone Age, I mean a sophisticated civilization with metallurgy. When they say research, they mean fiction. And when they say truth-seeking, they mean BSing for profit. Either they are ignorant or incompetent at the best, or they are outright frauds at the worst. And again, these truth-seekers which suppress information while accusing everyone else of not doing the research or suppressing information, the scam. You're either grossly incompetent or you're just outright scammers. But let's look at this arsenical bronze, dirty copper or chosen alloy by Heather Lechtman. And again, when ancient lost high technologists talk about, again, they literally say this. I'm not verbaling them. Brian Foster, ancient Uncharted X, they'll bring up Mohs scale. Mohs scale has to do with abrasives. It has nothing to do with the hardness of hammers and pounders. Again, if that was true, since knives and glass, mild steel has the same hardness as window glass at 5.5, which is higher than limestone at about 4. If the lost ancient high technologists were legitimate, they would have to say that a glass hammer or chisel would work on limestone. But they know it isn't, but again, they sell, anyway, it's BS, or just gross incompetence. But Mohs Hardness Scale, if anyone uses that especially in regards to stone pounders, chisels, or this type of thing, immediately know that these people are just friggin' idiots. They're not researchers, they're just recycling the same disinformation trope over and over and over again. What's Vickers Hardness Scale, as we see here, would be more appropriate, or the Knoop scale. But even then, it's not a dead set scale, because granite might be very hard, but granite fractures. It's a cement of different mineral, so it's much more complex than this, but just to put it into perspective. So we see this scale, arsenical AS, the blue line is arsenical bronze, and there we see the percentages. So 2%, 4% going up, compared to for instance, the green line here, which is air-cooled steel, and then we have another green line which is quenched steel, which has been hardened. Quenching is a way of hardening steel, and you see it goes off, but we'll come back to that in a moment. But arsenical bronze. Now, also the red line is tin bronze, but let's just sort of clear that and do a okay, firstly, and antimonial bronze, again used in the past, and again just like with arsenic bronze, it has the levels there. It's virtually essentially impossible that it was done purely by accident, given the amounts that can be found in there. But definitely in arsenical bronze, they were adding. There are no natural ores which have that amount of arsenic. There could be other ways during the process where it sort of builds up, and they maybe didn't quite know about it. They don't have to understand the periodic table of elements to, it could have been through centuries and centuries of trial and error. Arsenic bronze has a better look to it as well. It sort of polishes up nice, more silverish. It casts, when you cast it, it's better, but like a lot of times when people try and cast copper, it goes all gluggy and just doesn't work right. So there are advantages to arsenic bronze, and depending on the levels of some would argue that the lower levels, such as Ötzi, the Iceman, the guy frozen in the glacier, he had 0.3% arsenic, around about that level. Some would argue that that was not noticeable. I would say, well, like I can get two different quality hammers, and I knew which one, was better. And so again, I would say that a lot of people say, well, you couldn't tell the difference. Well, again, they tend to be, people, God bless them, but they're not workers, and when you have a good tool, you can tell I'm sure that they would tell the difference, because even if it's only a 6% increase, such as Ötzi the Iceman, I would be confident that after a few whacks that I would start to get the feeling of which one is better. But anyway, I digress. Arsenic bronze. So there we see a line comparing. There's the steel, the blue line is the arsenic bronze, and the red line is the tin bronze. And just to help out, so C, carbon, so you're adding, iron plus carbon is steel. Very small percentage. If you're up to over 0.6% carbon by weight in the steel is high carbon or hard steel. Medium or low carbon steel's below that, of course. So now we just have a comparison of the steel and the arsenic copper. Now up to 6% arsenic or 0.6% carbon in the steel, arsenical copper is superior in Vickers Hardness Scale than it is to steel, low carbon and medium carbon steel. Medium carbon steel is used in casting, so a lot of your car parts, camshafts, these types of things have castings in them. So it's not cast iron used to make toys. It's they're using it, so it's still a quite good material. So arsenical copper up to high carbon steel is higher in Vickers scale. Now it's important to note. So now we see that same line again, but then we look at quench steel. Look what happens when you quench steel. It gets really, really hard really quickly. But what happens if you use super hard steel, like high carbon or quench steel? When you harden it too much, it becomes brittle. And here's an example, and I'll show you a video. This first time I did it by accident, so I filmed it and ruined my tool the second time. But this is what happens when you use hard steel versus granite. It shattered, it broke. So again, the lost ancient high technologists, until the invention of hard steel. No, masons don't use hard steel, mate. Traditional masons use soft steel that's been tempered, but they do not use hard steel because it would break, it would shatter. And that's, yeah, again, like these lost high technologists, I'm not a metallurgist, I'm not a material scientist, but just with my limited experience working with things and actually doing things, these guys, they often say, oh, the archaeologists have never done a day's work in their life. Neither of the friggin' lost high technologists. They are like completely ignorant when it comes to these things. It's a scam.
Natural cracks. This was the same on the other side. Started flattening this off using a stone hammer. Now, if stone hammers were so bad and steel was so great, well, firstly, I'll use this end first. So, let's just get straight to it. So, if I'm using a hard steel chip, okay, let's see what happens when I use this. Okay, so firstly, I'm not, like, you're not removing mass, steel is not some super material where you're moving masses of metal. Now, if I was to do masses of stone, you're basically getting the same as a stone hammer. You just have to keep, even with steel chisels, okay, but look what happened to that tool. See how it broke off? All right. Hard steel is not a material you'd be using for chisels, all right? It's just not. It break now. Okay, I'll break off the other side now.